In the third section, we'll talk about extending the ASP.NET Core infrastructure. We'll focus mainly on two things, the middleware and the caching. In this video, we are going to talk about the middleware. You will see what is the middleware and how you can create a custom middleware. Basically, by using the middleware, you can intercept the incoming HTTP request and perform operations such as authentication, authorization, filtering, login, and whatever you choose to. You can build such pipeline and add multiple middleware to it that you can treat as a components, and each one component can decide whether the incoming request should be passed further on or not. You can even decide to stop the incoming HTTP request and immediately return the response to the end user. Let's jump into the Visual Studio Code and try to implement our own middleware. Here I will create a new folder and I will call it middleware. And let's create a new class. I will call it maybe a request log middleware. It will be a very simple middleware that will actually log the incoming request and will display the path of the request. At first, we need to create a custom constructor, and this constructor will take a single argument, and it will be the request delegate. And basically, you call this one next, as it describes what happens next. So we have this parameter here, and I will just assign it to a private field. And let's do it like this. And now you need to implement an invoke method. So it's called async task invoke. And this one accepts HTTP context. So context, add the using to the task. And here we can actually implement our middleware. So if we want to pass further the incoming request to the other middleware components, we'll just call await next or context like this. And here we can define our logic. So let's say we would like to log this information. So we can also inject here another services. Just keep in mind that whatever you inject here will be only created once when the middleware class will be created. And if you inject services here, they will be created for each HTTP request. So let's inject here our logger, logger of request log middleware, logger, add the using here, assign it to a private field, and let's just say here logger.log information, and we'll say requesting path and grab our path from the HTTP context. So context.request.path. And like I said, we can use our middleware here simply by saying app.use middleware of type request log middleware. Add the using here. And let's try to run our application right now. So I'll open my terminal and call .NET Run. And I'll open my website next to the terminal. So let's access the field URL. As you can see, we have this middleware here, requesting path / and then users. And again, here we have requesting path / users and so on. So let's try to create another one middleware. And this one I will call header validator middleware. And we can basically copy this one and just refactor it a little bit. So let's paste it here. Add usings. And let's say that we would like our middleware to check for a specific header. If the header is present, then we can actually stop the request and return a particular response object. So let's say at first it will log information like validating HTTP headers. And then let's say if our context request headers any. So if there is a header which has a name equals to test, then we can set our status code to bad request. So let's say HTTP status code bad request like this. And we can return our custom response. So let's say we have a JSON object here and we can use JSON library. So JSON convert serialize object, and let's create a new anonymous object with a message property, invalid header, and then await context response write async. So this is what we want to return to our API caller, our JSON object, and just return from this invoke method so that we won't actually invoke this next delegate. Now we can of course use the middleware here, but we can also do something nicer, which looks like this. So let's create here a new class and let's call it a middleware extensions. It will be a static class and it will contain two static methods. So static iApplication builder, and let's say use request block for the first middleware type. Add using here and make this an extension method. And this one will only return our builder that use middleware of type request log middleware, and another one below this. This one will actually use our header validator middleware like this, and we can say use header validator. Alright, so we can get back to our startup class, and instead of doing this, we can invoke our extension method. So at first, let's say use request block, and then use app.use header validator like this. And let's try to run our app now once again. So let's clear it, .NET run. Let's refresh the page. As you can see, here we have validating HTTP headers, and here we have requesting path. So this is the first middleware invocation and the second one. And like I said, the order matters here. So let's try to invoke our HTTP validator middleware with the invalid HTTP header. So in order to do it, I will just use curl, but you can also use Postman or another tool like Fiddler that can create an HTTP request and send it to the server. So I would say curl localhost 5000 with a header named test, and the value can be whatever, let's say test. Let's run such request. As you can see, we are getting back our response object with invalid header, which means that our HTTP header validator middleware actually performed the proper validation. And this is how you can create and use custom middleware with ASP.NET Core framework.